Okay, so it's good to catch up and see where we are at with Cody. Um, but a lot of the questions, like as we've been texting back and forth and you've been in the group meetings, it's the more we see, the more we see. And part of the reason I think that you're understanding and adopting a lot of what we're working on is because you've been through different training methods, different training theories, different techniques and methods, and you've already figured out a large part of what doesn't work for various reasons. So a lot of times we carry guilt because we didn't get it right for our horse, but it's how we all learn. There's no getting around it. And a lot of times when I work with novice horse owners or beginner riders, they might think I'm too slow or too precise or that I'm holding them back because they look around at their friends and they think, well, everybody else is doing XYZ. It can't be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
But what you've learned through experience and vet bills and frustration is it's not as easy as it seems to get to really ride in a way that benefits the body of the horse. So you can look at both sides of it. And I wouldn't dwell too much in feeling guilty because we all have to kind of go back and pay for our sins with our horse if we keep them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing we can do is learn from our mistakes and become more observant. And having all that experience under your belt of what hasn't worked in the past is really helpful to you going forward. It's, don't worry too much about it because we learn through mistakes. And at the end of the day, you have a sound horse who's not trying to kill you, who has,
Mm-hmm.
very mild behavioral issues and has been cleared by the vet. So you've done what you could do medically, and now the two of you can learn together. And he's going to struggle to make changes just like you are. So struggle is just part of the process. And what you're looking at is when he's struggling, like you had asked me about the right lead canter. So we might even talk about that first before we look at the video. But you made a great observation that if you ask for it too much, it starts to escalate his energy and he gets frantic, were your words, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that escalation of energy that we would call becoming frantic is the way the horse has of telling us that you're kind of pushing things a bit too much. It doesn't mean you can't ask the question, but there's a difference between physical struggle and a level of struggle where the horse starts to go towards fight and flight behavior. And that energy of defensiveness is usually a high energy. If they're physically struggling because they're learning and it's just hard for them to figure out a different coordination of their body, then the energy level is much lower. So they fuss, they maybe get busy with the mouth, they don't do something perfectly, they lose steering, they don't pick up the right lead, but you see them thinking about it each time rather than like building tension or anxiety. It doesn't look pretty, but the energy level is low. And that's the beginning of helping you separate the action from what's going on below the action, which is what the horse is feeling and thinking. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. Because you're going to see, especially in the process of really allowing the horse to show us what they know and what they don't know, like we talked about when to use supported work, when to not offer support, and how to balance those two elements of training so that you get a clear picture of what Cody actually knows and how much self-carriage he actually is developing along the way. And when we look at it, we're going to see struggle and we're going to see movement that's not perfect and not pretty. But that doesn't mean we are the ones that have to fix it for the horse. Right? So just like doing your kids' homework, it doesn't help them learn if you just, you see them struggle and you want to help them. And so you do their homework for them, then they don't learn.
That's a
And
good analogy.
yeah, it's kind of, oh, there's the kitty. Yep. You need to go down there. Whoop. So it's exactly like that. Like, I think I also talk sometimes about how a horse learning to balance, especially carrying a rider, is an equivalent learning curve to a human learning to ride a bike or swim or drive a car, right? So we can all do it. We're all capable, but we all learn how those specific coordinations. We're not born knowing how to ride a bike or swim but some people naturally take to it. Some people need a lot of coaching and help. Some people pick it up in a day. Some people, it takes them a year. Everybody's different, but we never question the fact that we're capable of learning how to swim, no matter our age, no matter our physical condition, blah, blah, blah. So that's how I look at horses. I go, they're all capable. Some will take longer. Some will struggle more here or there. Learning to ride a bike as an adult is a lot different than learning to ride a bike when you're a kid.
It is.
And that to me is a little bit of what rehab training is like. It's like, okay, you're now over 40 and you never learned to drive a car. So it's like we're less adaptable as we age because we
Mhm.
just get our patterns and habits sort of set. And so rehab work with any horse that's already had a substantial amount of training is a little bit like saying, okay, now you're going to learn how to drive the car in England, or you're going to learn how to drive the stick shift instead of being used to an automatic. So it's a level of challenge. It's not impossible, but it means that some of the things he used to do, like walk, trot, canter under saddle, suddenly as you're changing the internal coordination, he goes, I'm not quite sure how to trot anymore, or I'm not sure how to organize for a canter, say if he's having trouble with the right lead, because we've mixed up his nervous system. And it isn't that he can't ever do it or that something is wrong with him or that he has a pain issue that needs to be addressed. It's just a re-coordination. So when we change coordination, it's a big deal. And we can kind of forget where our feet go. So I don't know if you've ever had body work or you've ever had an adjustment or done something where it rattles your nervous system, changing your habit of movement. And it's very disorienting because we don't realize how much we take for granted sensing our body in time and space. So this happens to people as well as horses, but that's why it takes a little bit of patience in the beginning when they can't perform at their usual level because you're asking them to use their body in a very different way. And all the performance actions come back, but they just have to relearn how to do it a little bit,
Okay.
do it with a new use. Okay, so should we take a look at the video or do you have questions before we look?
No, I think we can look through the video and then I'll talk through some of the things I see and feel
Okay,
and then maybe kind of go from there.
okay,
And I didn't per se record these with the intention of reviewing it, so we'll see what we get.
okay.
I pretty much as a standard now record all of my sessions with him. It's good.
So I think there's 3 videos. I'm going to open the
Yeah.
lunge video
So
first.
yeah, because those are probably in order because I lunge him, then I ride him,
Okay,
even if it's just, 10 minutes or so.
okay. Hi, Kitty. And so when you've been lunging him, it's just, is it through the bridle? Yes.
Yes.
And that's the head shaking you were talking about.
Yes. And you'll notice in the last video, he doesn't do it at all.
Okay.
So it's been intermittent. Like some days he doesn't do it at all. Some days he does it more. He actually gashed his face on that side.
Oh,
So I don't know if it was itching and he rubbed it raw or if he crashed into something.
mm,
But can you see how he already naturally is wanting to have his head lower? Like,
yes.
I mean, right here, he's trying to scratch. And this is where I tell you, something's clearly still bothering him a little bit because he does this. So and I try to let him have a few minutes if he really wants to scratch his face so he doesn't get aggravated. But yeah, this is some of the head shaking challenges that we've been going through, which very well could be the sinus issues. Although, like I
Yes.
said, the last time I worked with him, he didn't do this at all.
Great.
So,
So when they come out of the back pushing down, having, extension of the thoracolumbar spine, and they've been chronically high-headed and they've been performing that way. Also, because you used, I think you call it the German neck stretcher, and you used draw reins, that can create a lot of excessive tension in the neck. So what he's doing when he started off, the way he's sort of nodding his head, yes, like, oh, right on cue, like that stretch actually affects the whole nuchal ligament and the muscles that go into the back under the saddle. So if he does that, particularly at the beginning, it's just him kind of finding a way to loosen himself up.
okay.
Now, it might be excessive because he's been restricted in his head and neck with the various like when you ride, when you don't have the draw reins or the German neck stretcher on, you're very light on the reins. So I don't think it comes from your hands. I think it comes from devices that you've used on him.
Okay.
And this is just him letting go of all that tension. The itchiness, and if he's excessively rubbing, or even the time that he sort of spent doing this, could be related to the sinus infection as well. That could be part of it. But what he's doing, especially in the beginning with his nose in the dirt and that head tossing, when you ride and they do that, you can feel the back muscles loosen. So it goes right down their top line as they play with that particular use of their head and neck. And then as you start bumping them up into trot, it stops. Now, that itching of the front legs is another thing you'll see a lot as they start to change their muscle use. So one of the first things I notice in this video, and I'd have to look to compare, but I don't see him as often as you do. And what it looks like to me is that he's quote unquote put on weight, which I think is just a release of chronic tension through his body. His barrel looks softer, his hindquarter looks rounder, his neck doesn't look as tight and thin. It looks like his body is sort of plumped since the last video I looked at,
Yeah,
which,
and he hasn't been in the same kind of work, right? Before he was walk, trot, canter regularly, and we'd probably do the majority of our work at the trot. So over the last month, let's say, he's had a drastic change in his program because now we do the majority walking with a little trotting. And even this kind of trotting is not laboring to him. Half the time when I unsaddle him, his saddle pad isn't even wet. So some of his body changes might be all of that.
right. And what we call hard work doesn't necessarily involve cardiovascular. So we tend to think that when we work horses, we kind of have to see them sweating or we have to do a lot of fast speed work. But when you're actually working on the balance, as like just paying attention, see there in this moment where he elevates his neck, he's not in extension as badly as he was before, but it's a mild version. So then when you ask for canter, he starts really objecting. So by pushing him into faster speeds, at least what I'm seeing in this video, it's increasing the tension. And yet what he's doing is falling in love with the feeling of decreasing the tension. So he's sort of giving you a minimal effort with the trot and the canter, and he's objecting to it a lot. So let me explain. When we talk about work, that a lot of times people think they're not working the horse hard when you're changing the balance. Cardio is very different than muscle development. Those are two different things. So speed work is going to change the muscle use as we go from walk to trot to canter. There's different muscles used in the body, but they don't have to be out of breath. When you're changing the balance, what you're basically telling him to do is don't use any of the muscles that you've been using in poor balance, and do use all the muscles that might have weakened or atrophied when you improve the balance. So they can get quite fatigued from what seems like light, easy work at the walk and even a little bit of trot and no canter. So what I'm seeing here is you're on a routine with him, but I'd like to get you to observe a little bit more and not be attached to the idea that he needs to trot or canter or every session. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And let me pause that a second. Are you still putting the lunge line over the pole?
I do. And I know that you don't like that. I do not like putting it through the bottom. To me, it puts way too much pressure, like on the outside. And the way my lunge line is, it has a big clip like this that then puts pressure there.
Mm.
So I've lunged him his whole life with it over his head. He's not one of those horses that really pulls on it. So I don't ever really see him doing this kind of motion with his head where it concerns me.
Well,
I
what
can
would
keep an eye
concern
on it.
me is your question was when he's going on the right lead canter, you're seeing that he can't quite get his right hind leg under him. And so he rotates his whole body and sort of thrusts the leg under deeply, right?
Mhm.
That's directly
Which that
related.
was to the left, but to the right, it's different.
Okay, so when he goes into canter, let me back it up a little bit to where he was cantering. The high-headedness and the back pushing down is is him telling you, I don't have enough pushing force to get into canter any other way than by pushing my back down. So it's up to you. Do you want to keep practicing him putting his back down in order to get the canter? Or do you just want to leave the canter a little bit and reinforce the muscle use that doesn't push the back down? And then with any pressure on the pole, the pressure on the lower jaw and the mouth, if it's even, you see when he starts tossing his head, you can see the saddle as he canters is tilting. That's rotation. So let me back that up a little bit and see if I can slow it down.
I mean, I agree he has rotation and I see it, but I don't think it's originating from the lunge line in the way I have it positioned. Because when you see there's no tension hardly ever on the lunge line, like it's very slack. So it's not like I'm pulling his head into a position. Does that make sense?
Right. But if you have, like, if you want lateral bending, it only takes a millimeter or two of flexion at the pole to put the entire spine into the question of lateral bending. So the same is true with rotation. So if he's rotating his head, because when he throws his head up is when he hits the lunge line, right? So if he throws his head up and you get a tilt of the pole, you're reinforcing the whole spine going into too much rotation.
I guess I just don't see that
So,
happening. I don't see the tension and the head turning. I
right.
mean, maybe
So
I
the
could use
way,
something.
no, the way you're seeing it is when you ride, if he's pushing up on one seat bone, or when you add enough force, say going to canter, then that's where he can't use the limbs correctly if you have too much lateral bending or too much rotation. So it's not a leg problem. And you can inject the joints and make the joints comfortable. But if the spine has too much lateral bending or rotation, you're always going to have abnormal movement of the legs. So that's the importance of it. But you can do what you like. I'm just saying watch it because the pressure on the mouth should be no more than what you're feeling pressure on the pole. The difference is that if the horse pulls or throws his head up, it's the direction of force that he's feeling on the line, not the amount of force. Does that make sense?
So then is there something else I can use? Because I just really personally am against putting it on the outside ring. Like I just really don't want to do that.
Yeah, put a
So
halter
should
on.
I? Okay.
Yeah, just lunge him in a halter
Now I
and then
have a
put the
rope
bridle on
halter, or should I
otherwise.
just do a regular halter?
The rope halter, it doesn't matter because on
Okay.
a unsupported lunging, you can attach the lunge line directly under the jaw. But I think you'll find a difference, especially going when you're adding speed. I think you'll see an immediate difference if he doesn't feel any kind of pressure in that element of rotation or lateral bending. So I would just lunge him in a halter and put the bridle on afterwards, and then that'll save the whole rein chewing question as well.
Okay.
You know
Now
what I
I
mean?
do have one of those attachments too, where it like clips to both sides and then it has the ring. You know what
Hmm.
I'm talking about?
Yeah, that
Did
works fine too.
those? Okay.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just because I don't want to see you shooting yourself in the foot trying to fix what we've discussed as a rotation problem and then aggravating the problem in part of your daily work. Like that doesn't make sense to
Okay.
me to have anything that could potentially aggravate it at the same time you're trying to fix it is just going to put you in a loop of 2 steps forward, 2 steps back,
Okay.
right? So I would try, and a lot of horses, especially if he's head tossing a lot, try lunging him just in the halter and
Okay.
see if it makes a difference not to have any bit pressure at all and just to have the rein snapped under the lunge line snapped under his head so he doesn't have any pressure on the top of his head or in his mouth and see what he
Okay.
does with that.
Okay. I can definitely try that.
Yeah. Because one of the things is just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. That's the tricky part with horses. There's not a lot we can see with our human eye, but we can feel the difference, especially when we ride. We can feel the repercussion of it.
Okay.
And I think part of the excessive, like to me, this is kind of on the high end of head tossing and head shaking. So for you to call the vet is very reasonable. And the fact that he has some kind of sinus infection, again, could be aggravating the problem. But that's
Yeah. You
why,
see, like even on the fence, like he'll rake the fence when he gets near it.
yes. And the itchiness is something that comes with restoring suppleness to muscles. So if his neck was tighter than you could see, but he could feel as he's trying to loosen it up, I think it's a really good idea just to take away mouth and pull pressure entirely and see what he does with that. Because as his shoulder muscles loosen up, as his neck muscles loosen up, the head tossing is a little bit like us stretching when we feel sore and tight. He's stretching himself by tossing his head that way. The itchiness is when we increase the circulation to tight muscles, because when the muscles are constantly excessively contracted, it decreases the circulation, especially to the outer layers of the capillaries and the skin. So as we restore circulation by releasing excessive contraction, they get itchy, kind of like
Okay.
pins and needles. Right. So the itchiness, like they'll stop a lot and itch their front legs. They'll turn around, bite at their shoulders a little bit. They'll rub themselves more. All of that is part of the normal process of restoring healthy suppleness and circulation to what were chronically tight muscles.
So this direction, he looks lame. You could even see it's very, very slight, but like he has a slight like head bob.
Yes.
And this is where I thought his front right is bothering him and that hind left. I'm sorry, the hind right and the front right. I get his hind right has been the leg that traditionally has the most problems, right? He had the hock surgery on that leg. He had the broken splint bone. So that leg, he always reaches way under and over, but lately to me, it seems way more pronounced than usual.
Mhm.
And we just injected the right front coffin joint because he again does have navicular. And in October, we only injected the front left. And then my vet said, well, maybe now his right is bothering him because we made the other one more comfortable. So anyways, it has since been injected, but
The right front.
the right front.
Okay.
Yes.
No, and what I'm seeing is I think as he looks a lot more supple to me across the board from head to tail. And that's why he sort of looks like he's put on weight because he's just plumping up those muscles. But you see what, can you see my cursor on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So here around the shoulders, you see that muscle definition where
Mhm,
you can see bands of muscles sort of defined in this stride up on the left shoulder.
mhm.
All of that muscle definition indicates tightness of the muscles. When the muscles are truly in a neutral, healthy use, you don't see muscle definition. It looks smooth and a little bit like raw meat, jello-y, right? So he's got quite a bit of tightness around both front legs and up into the neck. His hindquarter and barrel look like it's softened up a little bit, but what you're seeing here to the right is, I would say, it's much more a struggle with the right hind than it is the right front.
Okay. And
So
he, in general, this direction likes to bring his hindquarter to the inside and his upper body to the outside. So you'll see him tracking in the circle, like hindquarter in, head out, like on a diagonal
that's actually, I
sometimes.
think, him trying to get himself a little straighter on the circle. So
Okay.
visually, what it looks like when they're properly straight on a circle is it looks like what you're describing, where the hindquarter is slightly in and the front end is slightly out because the line or the path of the circle is actually straight only right under the saddle in the middle of the horse.
Okay.
And so he bends his neck a little to the outside, which is fine because when you're lunging like this, he's not going to look perfect. You're just asking him to explore his body and find more comfort.
I try to walk with him, so I can get the circle as big as possible.
Mhm.
But when I'm not really pushing him a lot, because I'm really trying to work on that, believe it or not. All right, we'll watch this for a second. See, this is where he just struggles so much.
Yeah.
And you see he tries to break like too, like he doesn't even want to hold it. And he leans over even like
Yeah. So
leans
what he's
in.
doing at the trot, he's struggling to find comfort. At the walk, he looks very comfortable. At the trot, he's struggling to find comfort. And at the canter, he can't find it.
Yes.
So once you ask for the transition, you're still pushing him while he's cantering.
Yeah.
All the benefit of canter work is in the first transitional stride. The first stride or two is where you get benefit from a canter transition without doing damage. The longer he canters, the more potential damage you're going to do because he can't balance at the canter.
Okay. I
So,
try here every time he breaks to let him trot like a circle or so before I ask again, but I do try for a couple transitions.
no, but even at the trot,
But
he's not coming out of extension at the trot
no,
before you're asking for the next
he's not.
canter.
Okay.
So, what I would do is I would start to look at most of your time on the lunge line. Like, let's see if you let him walk here a little bit. Oh, okay, you're done.
I think I stop him.
But let me go back to where he's walking. Because think of it this way. It doesn't matter what you're doing when you're changing the balance. What matters is how he's doing what he's doing. So the path of least resistance to change the body the fastest is to find what can he do in the best use of his body? Where does he lose the ideal use of his body? Where does it become a little sketchy? Where does he lose it entirely and can't find it? So you can ask him to do whatever you want to ask him to do, but he's going to tell you in his posture what he can and can't do in balance, right? So in the walk, when he walks, he's tossing his head and neck, he's putting his nose on the ground, he's itching his front feet, but he's maintaining the walk without you having to push him at all. It's not a brilliant walk, but for his body, the nose on the ground is part of healing the poor use of his back and all of the chronic tension that you've been battling that generates lameness, right? So even if you only just let him walk for 10 minutes before you rode, you would get more benefit out of the time than if you push him to canter right now. Now, you're still going to get benefit playing with the trot and playing with the canter, but making him hold the trot or canter at the expense of how he's using his body is, again, it's a circular problem.
Yeah, it's counterproductive to what we're
It's
trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I like to be efficient. I just don't see the point of spending if I try a trot transition and he's doing what he's doing now. Right now, I would look for this horse to break to the walk, stretch his back and neck more, and then I would try another trot. But I don't
Okay.
want him in that trot. Him moving in that use of his body is counterproductive to my end goal.
Okay.
And it makes us feel better to say, okay, well, he did 5 minutes of trotting. But you either build a pattern and a habit of good use, or you're building a pattern and a habit of poor use. The horse shows you in the moment which one he's giving you, right?
Mhm.
So if you look at right now, the walk is a solid home base for this horse, which is great. So there, I would let him break the trot, let him walk a few strides, ask again for another trot. He might only hold the trot a stride or two because part of what he's objecting to, and maybe some of the head tossing, is him telling you, I'm struggling here. So what I would do is, like right now, long and low is his friend muscularly, even though he's on the forehand. So if he's long and low at the walk, you get the least amount of concussion on the front legs while he's changing his muscles. If he's long and low at the trot, you get the second least amount of concussion on the legs. When he goes into extension, high-headed, you increase the concussion on the front legs. So if he's resorting to extension and high-headed trot or canter, you're increasing the concussion on the front legs, first of all through the posture, and secondly through the speed and the impact force. So I wouldn't risk, if you just paid to have a coffin joint injected, I certainly wouldn't risk extension or high speed with the back end extension, because again, you're just taking the injection and testing it, using it up, right? Rather than allowing the joint injection to give him time to work soundly. If you push him into extension or you ask for speed where he has to resort to extension, you're excessively concussing what you're trying to alleviate.
Okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
even it does. So even here, he has his moments where he trots and he relaxes and comes a little lower.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I have to let him trot a little bit to get there. So in these stages, are you saying it's best to just let him walk until he starts off in a good trot? So if he starts in a trot and he gets upset, instantly bring him down to the walk.
And you don't even have to bring him down. This horse is seeking comfort. The more you allow him to find comfort, the stronger he is seeking it. So,
Okay.
like right there, what I would do, he's going to break from the trot. So just let it happen.
Okay. Yeah,
And
he
once
he'll
once he
break.
He might break after 2 strides. Who cares?
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because in the transition is where you need the maximum amount of pushing and braking. So you're actually building more strength the more transitions you do. You're not building as much strength when you maintain a gait. And especially, you're not building the right kind of strength if you're maintaining the gait in poor use of the body. So, what I would do with the lunging is he's going to be quick now to go to long and low. So, I would let him start, have 2 laps of walk. Once his nose is down on the ground, have 2 laps of that. Then, after the 2 laps, push him to trot while he's long and low. If he breaks the trot, but he keeps the neck long, let him have only 1 or 2 strides of walk and then send him back to trot. Right? So you can ask for upward transitions as often as you like, but I would not ask for an upward transition or make him hold the trot or canter as soon as he starts to shorten his neck. I
Okay.
would just back off the pressure with the whip and he's likely to break gait. Because you
Okay.
have to push him so much, what that tells me is he really wants to just break gait and get comfortable.
He does.
So you allow him to break gait, give him just enough time to lengthen the neck again once he makes the downward transition. So for him, that might only be 2 or 3 strides, and then you can ask for your next upward transition. And you're going to repeat the transitions. Like it may be 2 strides of trot, 2 strides of walk, 2 strides of trot, 2 strides of walk, 2 strides of trot, 2 strides of walk over and over. But if he's maintaining a long neck and a little bit of a low head position, then every upward transition, you're asking him to increase and build pushing power. And every downward transition that he makes with a long neck, his choice, you're increasing the use or the strength of the braking muscles. So it's part of building his capacity to lift his back. And that's the value of transitions over maintenance of gait. Right? Maintenance of gait to me means nothing because it can be maintenance of crap and all you're doing is repeating a bad habit. So I would look for let him lengthen his neck, which you have quickly in the walk. Then you use the walk as home base. You visit the trot, come back to the walk, visit the trot, come back to the walk. Then you'll see that the trot slowly starts to improve and becomes another strong source to then visit the canter. And from the canter, you might have to go all the way back to the walk, then the trot, then the canter again. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
Okay. So the more you get, like here before we start this video, the more he's sort of long in the neck like this and in this posture, the less concussion you're putting on the front legs, the more you're working the right muscles and the more you're building the body in a coordination that's going to lead to better performance as well as soundness. So when we ask them to do something at the expense of the posture, then we can't complain if they resist us or if they do it poorly, because we're saying do it no matter how you do it, just do it. And that's going to have a cumulative weakening effect on the body rather than a cumulative strengthening effect on the body. And that's why
Okay.
I get impatient with it because I go, why would I keep shooting myself in the foot just to see my horse canter? He can't,
Mm-hmm.
if he can't canter, he can't canter today, but I'm going to try it again tomorrow. Or I'm going to try 1 or 2 transitions. Okay, they're not good, but it didn't cause him to learn to canter that way. We just visited the canter and came back to the walk or the better posture. Does that make sense?
It does. There's this clinician that I follow, and he had said one time that doing more canter isn't going to fix your canter, or doing more bad canter isn't going to fix your canter. You're just going to get more bad canter, you
Bingo.
know?
That's
So it was
exactly
just
what I'm
kind of
saying.
like, yeah.
Yeah. And doing bad trot isn't going to fix
So
your trot.
yeah, yes.
And
So I think
it's,
that's the cycle I need to get out of.
yes, yes. And part of it is just how we're conditioned as riders that don't dare let the horse break the gait. Maintain gait, maintain direction. When that's
Mhm.
the priority of the training, what you get is the horse will maintain gait, will maintain direction, and will have a crappy trot and canter because
Mhm.
they're going to do it at the expense of their comfort and balance. So we have to take away maintain gait, maintain direction as a priority and put it at the bottom of the list. What I want to see is, can you explore your body to show good movement, good posture, good choices, whether it's walk, trot, or canter? Because if he can do it at the walk, which he can do, then you're strengthening the body in a way that he will be able to do it in the trot and the canter as he increases strength. But as soon as we say, go ahead and trot or canter, even though you look like crap, it's okay for a few strides, but the longer they maintain it, the more we strengthen that habit in the body. So we can't complain if they have a bad trot or a bad canter because we asked for it.
Yeah, and the good thing about him is he rarely curls and shortens the neck. He more like he likes to go like this.
Yes. Yeah, so much more consistent. The little bit of head tossing is mostly on the turn. So on the turn is where you're challenging the engagement of both hind legs and you're challenging the lifting of both shoulders.
That's Lori in the background, by the way,
Ah, yes,
sweeping.
I recognize the barn.
Yeah.
So this is actually very good. And the fussiness he's showing you is what I was, when we first started recording, that's him physically struggling, but not upset about it. What he's telling
Okay.
you is he's got things to work out. So there's a little bit of fussiness with the bit. He wants his head. He doesn't even want the light rein contact that you're offering.
Yeah, because I try to keep my hands wide and a little low to help encourage him coming down. And then, using a little bit of bend to get him to stretch to disrupt the
Mm-hmm. The back going down
yeah.
and the head up. Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. So you could even lighten the touch on the reins a tiny bit more. Not that you have a heavy touch. It's just Cody saying, I'd like more space.
Okay, yeah, because I try to keep a light
Mm-hmm. You,
contact.
he's not going to give you a consistent contact yet because he's not stable in his back and hindquarter. So until he gets more stable in his back and hindquarter, it's kind of impossible. Oops, hang on, let me turn the sound off. There we go. Sorry
Sorry,
about that.
that's
Um,
okay.
until he, like, the head tossing is part of him loosening up the back muscles all the way back to the hindquarter. The little bit of tightening in his neck, which is great that you're noticing, you're bending, you're turning, you're interrupting. Once he goes there and puts his nose into ground, it's not time yet to try to have a rein contact. So I would just loosen the reins and let him be down there.
Okay, yeah, I let it go right through my fingers when he starts to stretch down. So
Yes.
when I feel him coming down, I just let him take it. And these are actually a longer set of reins I bought that's specific for doing this kind of work because my other reins, I would have to go way forward with it. So
Yes.
you'll notice that these reins are really long and I actually
Yeah.
really like them. These are the ones I don't want him to bite because they were like $120.
Yes.
I was like, he's gonna destroy them and I'm gonna be so pissed.
Yeah, that's
But
another reason to lunge him in the halter so he doesn't have a chance to chew on him. Because when you're
yeah,
riding, the light contact or even a little bit lighter, you're keeping, like, his ears are halfway out. He's thinking internally. The head tossing, the changes in speed, the little bit of tightening of his neck, all of that tells you this is not easy for him. So even though it's working at the walk, you've got his attention, which tells you you have found a level of challenge that he's working on something, right? He's working on changing the muscles, the coordination of the skeleton, the use of his body, and it's keeping him mentally engaged. So if you were walking and his mind was out of the arena, then I would say we need to ask for more, right? But what he's showing in just in the walk is physical struggle. He's not upset about it. He's feeling pretty good about it, but you're working him. So don't feel like you're not working him just because you're not trotting or cantering.
Okay.
And it's quite a lot of work to develop where he has overused his muscles, has supported the skeletal use that's dysfunctional. So when he gets to long and low and you just leave him there as a rider and maybe do some easy turns, keeping the neck straight, maybe play a little bit with walk or trot or some speed adjustments, that's quite a lot of work for his body right now. And the way you know that is because he's focused and calm and attentive, but he's also showing you fussiness and signs of struggle. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't feel like it's a lot of work. It's easy for us, but that doesn't mean it's easy for them. And you're in the realm of building the body when you have exactly what you have here at the walk. So if he were stuck in long and low and he wasn't lifting his head up and down and wasn't tossing his head, if you have 5 minutes of him mooching around on a loose rein with his nose in the dirt, I would say, okay, you need to think about going to trot to keep him occupied and keep him challenged. What I'm seeing at the walk is you're getting a lot of changes. He's on board with it. And the trot's not bad. Like that, you could have waited until his nose was a little deeper and he might have pushed off better, but that wasn't bad. And
It's
you get
incredibly difficult to post on a horse going so slow
within sit.
because I was just afraid of because of the mild kissing spines he has. I get so scared to just sit on his back and trot. If you think it's okay, I will. I think mentally, I worry if I'm hurting him, I guess.
The only time you don't want to sit is if you're really bouncing in the
Okay.
saddle. Right now, and this question comes up a lot. It's a good one to address because we tend to think posting alleviates the back. But when you're posting, all your weight is in the stirrups for half of the stride, which means all of your weight is concentrated on the stirrup bars, which is a very small concentration of pressure. That can actually be harder on the horse's back than keeping your body weight more evenly spread out through the entire tree of the saddle.
Okay.
So first of all, on just a impact force level, posting, when you put your weight in the stirrups, you're concentrating your entire body weight into much smaller kind of pounds per square inch because it's in the stirrup
Okay.
bars, not in the tree. So if you're a good rider and your legs are not heavier than your seat and your body weight feels equal, then if the horse isn't trotting so forcefully that it's bouncing you out of the saddle, your equal weight distribution through the entire tree of the saddle is easier on their back. And if you can sit the trot, where he needs help right now is having something to push into. The reason you
Okay.
have to use so much effort to post is because he has no push.
Right.
So if you keep your body soft and you're not slamming up and down in the saddle, that's the concussive force that people tell you it's better to post if you're doing that. That is true. So posting is really for the purpose of keeping the rider quiet and stable on a big, bouncy trot that otherwise would slam your body weight over and over into their back. He's not posting, he's not pushing that much,
No.
right?
And I just want to mention you can't see it because it's the same color as my saddle, but I always ride with a thin line that supposedly
Mm-hmm.
helps take the shock and distribute the weight even more.
Yes,
Um,
it's a great tool. And so what you can do, again, I think you and Cody are going to live in the land of a million transitions. I think that's
okay.
where you're going to find the most success is letting him, like when you ride, if you're having to push him to maintain the walk, you could let him halt, ask for the walk, let him halt, ask for the walk. You get the same muscle building benefit. And remember, lifting the back, which is going to correct all of the problems with the legs, is the balance between the braking and pushing use of the muscles. So the more you play with in transitions, that muscle use is maximized. So you build those muscles the fastest, which involve back muscles as well as hindquarter muscles, but you build those muscle groups the fastest, the more transitions you do. The upwards build pushing and the downward build braking. So I think if you still have to kind of push him to maintain a walk, play with letting him halt for just literally one breath, like not long, and then put your leg on, ask for the walk. In the trot, the same thing, because you see there where he resorts back to extension, you start kicking him to maintain the trot.
Hmm.
That's where I
That's
would just,
also a bad habit I have when I'm not paying attention, where I really start like squeezing and pumping my legs. So that's a very bad habit that I need to try to stop doing.
well, and I think that's what shows up in the lunging. Like the lunging is a good place for you to change how you think about it. And then when you ride, you'll have better control over your aids. So after the trot, I paused it right here because this deep stretch right now is the key to unlocking the old habits and the problems that you've been having with Cody. So the more of this posture, the better. Now imagine if you're in this posture during the walk and you add leg and he can stay long as he moves into trot. Then he's no longer pulling by shortening the neck, pulling with the front end, dropping the back. Every upward transition, he's having to push from the hindquarters through the back into the upward transition. That's how you build the pushing capacity of the body. It has nothing to do with speed. It has to do with the posture they use while you're increasing push. Does that make sense?
It does.
So you'll see it in the lunging and you'll see it in the riding. And I think rather than fighting Cody's choice, you can work with his choice because, again, like the law of inertia tells us, it takes more energy to stop and start and stop and start than it does to just maintain a constant speed or direction. So that's why your car gets better gas mileage on the highway than the city. So metabolically and muscularly, he has to spend more energy to break the gait rather than maintain it, right? So if you work with his choice and you say break gait whenever you want to, I'm just going to ask for another upward, so it's going to cost you more fuel. He's not dumb. He will figure out eventually as you repeat the upward transitions, he will experience that it's easier to maintain the gait once the gait becomes comfortable to maintain. So your job is to watch the posture and the timing of your requests to build the comfort of movement. It'll be his job to figure out that it's more energy efficient to maintain the walk or maintain the trot rather than break and start and break and start a million times. And I go, the law of inertia is just a law of our physical universe. It's going to work. I just don't know how quickly, right? But it always works because it's a physical law of a moving body. It's going to cost him more energy to keep breaking gait. But right now, you're the one spending the energy to maintain the gait, not him. You're the one working harder to keep him going than he is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, as long as his brain is thinking more about stopping than going, he's not working very hard to improve the way he trots or canters.
I got too close to the pivot here.
Ah,
It comes back as I circle around.
okay. So do you
But yeah,
understand
this makes sense. It's just a big shift in how I do things
it's a
because
huge shift.
yeah, because I definitely do have these patterns of things that I do with him, how we warm up on the lunge line, how, and you almost feel like you have to get X amount of, like you have a goal in your head, like, oh, we should try to trot a little more and a little more every time, but
The goal, just change the goal. So your goal is looking at actions and speed and cardio, right? Just change the goal to say, I want more steps with your neck long. It's a different goal, one that is more useful to building his soundness and his performance. So it's a matter of changing how we think about it. Rather than thinking, I need walk, trot, canter, we think, I don't care how I get it, but I need a long neck and I need him to not choose to push his back down. No matter whether we're turning, going straight, walk, trot, canter, riding, or groundwork, you make the posture and use itself the goal, and Cody will keep showing you what he can do in that posture and when it gets shaky. And when you change your goal to the use of the body rather than the actions or performance of the job, all of a sudden you start to make progress at warp speed. Your goal is not a goal that necessarily works for Cody being able to give you back what you want. So the first goal for me is always the horse. Number one, does my horse feel safe? Your horse, other than the one canter video in the very beginning, I never see your horse become defensive against you. He is 100% on board working with you and not fearful in the least. So everything else you see from him is him letting you know physically what's easy and what's not easy, right? The goal is to make good movement easy. And that's always the most comfortable way for the horse to move, both for them and us. They're easier to ride, the better the balance. We don't work as hard. So my first goal is, does my horse feel safe and comfortable, willing to work with me? Yes. My second goal is, do I have a mechanically sound posture, no matter what I'm doing? Those are two goals that put the horse ahead of my agenda. And that is an unhuman way of thinking. It's literally putting the horse's needs ahead of our own goals and desires. But it's the fastest way to progress, because when you give the horse what they really truly need, which is safety and comfort, especially with weight on their back at high speeds and tight turns, then they give back to us everything we ever wanted. So I would just kind of change your thinking and explore a little bit, because you're a good rider. You've got a great relationship with this horse. You've really got a solid walk and a half solid trot. And the problems you're seeing at canter are because he's not getting enough time. You're sort of asking for the next thing before he has enough time for his body to truly settle into the change that you're looking for. And that'll be different every day. Some days you might only work at the walk. Other days you might work walk, trot, even a little bit of canter, but you're not going to spend too much time. You can absolutely experiment, but don't spend too much time maintaining a bad posture. Maintain the first biggest change for him that your vet has confirmed and you're feeling and he's showing you is useful to him has been long and low, out of high headed into long and low. So you go, okay, you don't even need, like, you're getting long and level, but it's bordering with a little bit of struggle and tightness.
Yeah,
So
and I try to keep asking him periodically to go a little lower. But you'll see he'll
I
stretch down and then he pops right like not super high, but he'll do this where he
Mhm.
like stretches a little and then he comes back to like level.
But part of that, like just when he goes deep, sometimes you might have a little too much pressure, not that you have much at all, but for him, maybe loosen the reins a tad more, or really learn not to push with the legs. Because as soon
Yeah,
as he goes
because I
into
do.
long and low, he might need to also slow down to maintain it. But you have a very strong habit with you to always push with the whip or the legs.
Yes.
And that could be part of what's perpetuating him not being able to stay in long and low. It might not be, but I would experiment with that and see if you back off, maybe he breaks to the halt and you go, okay, now I'm going to use my legs to get you back in the walk. But maybe he just needs to slow down the walk, and you're pushing with the legs is telling him don't stay in long and low. Like that could be how he's perceiving the leg aid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we don't know. As long as we're active, we're contributing. The only way we know what is genuinely the horse's decision is when we're not active. So the more active we are, the less we actually know about the horse's choice because we're influencing it every time we're active. So I
Okay.
would say play with being less active when you ride and really see what does he choose to do if I hesitate on my leg aid or have less of a rein aid or maybe quiet my seat or body even more. How does he respond? And it may be good, it may not be good. It may be the ticket to what you were looking for. Or if it doesn't change what he's doing, then, oops, sorry. Oh, hang on. I don't know how I did that.
It's
I
an
know.
ad,
It's
probably.
an ad.
It's okay.
I know. Let me get back to here. Oh, okay. Let me go back. I accidentally clicked something. Let me get back to the link. Sorry, now
Yeah, I
my
love
internet.
technology.
I know now my internet just went whoa, whoa, whoa.
Of course.
Not happy. Let me try that and
I
let
mean,
me
if
try
you
that.
want, we probably don't even have to review the video. It just the other that was just the most recent one. I think I only trot walk in that video. I don't ask him to trot at all in the last one that I did.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a lot more of that just getting him to walk and periodically asking for more stretch and more stretch.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I think I accidentally closed that
yeah,
one.
that's okay.
Yeah. I accidentally somehow switched to some advertisement for a movie, so I have no idea.
Okay. I mean, like I said,
Um,
I know you spent an hour with me. I think I understand. I need to bring it down a notch,
well,
focus
it's
more on
not
the
like
transitions.
I don't want to discourage people from being ambitious, and I don't want to discourage you from experimenting. And I like sometimes when I say these things to people, they go, "Oh my God, I can only walk for like weeks and weeks and weeks," right? It's not that at all. I encourage you to experiment. You can try walk, trot, canter every single ride, but you can't be attached to him doing
Yeah.
it.
Well, I need to, it's like you said, I need to focus more on the quality of the movement and
Mhm.
making sure he's giving me the right, um, position with his body, because
Yes.
otherwise I'm being counterproductive. So I
Yes.
think trying to focus on the more transitions and then go more, I don't want to use the wrong word, not forward, but, let him stay in that gait if he's long and low with the right body position
Yes.
and
And
not getting defensive.
that's why I call it posture because it gets labeled conformation a lot, or it gets labeled as a conformational defect or a lameness issue in the legs. But really, the posture, which is the use of the whole spine, the head, the spine, the pelvis, that posture systemically, globally changes everything. It is so critical And it's the last thing we're taught to look at, right? So for him, this sort of long and level posture, which would be better than long and low theoretically, but he's so new at coming out of having a hollow back and a high short neck that he's probably not quite lifting the back here. He's more likely dropping the back. So to err on the side of a full and certain change, I would still look for long and low with the head below the withers in the walk, in the trot, in the canter, during an upward transition, during a downward transition. That would be my singular goal. And I would have fun experimenting to see, like green eggs and ham. Can we get it here? Can we get it there? Can we get it on a turn? Can we get it on a straight line? Right? Can we get it here? Can we get it there? And it's just a change of prioritizing the goal, right? So rather than thinking we have to maintain canter, I agree with that other clinician 100%. Practicing a bad canter only gives you more bad canter.
Yep. Yep.
And really we risk laming our horses in the process.
Yes.
So what builds soundness builds the body for all performance and develops a better riding horse is the use of the spine and the hindquarters. So that's your posture. The neck is just kind of an indicator, right? That's why I said you can't distort the neck with leverage and get the back. But with you giving him less pressure on the reins and letting him, even though he's tossing his head and being annoying, it's showing you, it's reflecting what he's doing with his back. And he wants to stretch his back out. He wants to release all that chronic tension. So he's on board with you. But all of these little funky steps and stiffness in the legs and tossing and itching and all of that is him telling you, this is not nothing to me. We think we're doing nothing because you're just mooching around at the walk. He's telling you, you've got my full attention and I'm struggling to do what you're asking me right here, right now. And you have to respect that. It's harder than we perceive sometimes.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I'm going to do, because that video we didn't watch, I spent about 30 minutes just walking him. And before that, I did maybe 10 minutes of in-hand work. Because in hand, I can get him to stretch and keep his head down the whole time. I haven't been able to transition that yet to riding, but at least when I work him in hand, with very light contact, he will just keep his head down and walk all over the arena.
Great. So go from in hand to achieving that on the lunge line as his choice, and then you will easily get it once you're on board.
Okay.
So kind of look at that as a building block.
Well, what I notice is the longer I stay on him, the better he gets. And I feel like in this video, it was 17 minutes, and I know it's not a time thing, but when I rode him for 30 minutes, the last 10 minutes of my ride were much better quality. So I think he might almost even need just a little more time of walking.
I would
to
agree.
fully relax into it.
Yes.
Versus being like, oh, we're going to walk for 15 minutes and then I'm going to get to go in my pasture and eat. Because honestly, this is feeding time too. They eat in the afternoon. So when I get there, he's either just been fed or he's about to be fed. And it's just with the light, I have no choice in my work schedule. So unfortunately, he gets ridden around dinner time. But
that's okay, because I think you're going to find transitions and most of your time at home base in the walk where he easily finds his best use on the ground or under saddle. You're not going to have a digestive issue even if he just ate. If you push him to maintain speed in a poor posture, yeah, you could have digestive issues from that. But I think right now the walk and the transitions, like you said, the longer you stay on and with your weight in the saddle, it still takes him a while for you to feel the improvement. So I would give him more time, because he's doing it. It just takes longer than what maybe we think it should take. But it is what it is.
Because I easily could spend an hour with him, between the prep and then the walking, even if it's like 30 minutes of walking and like 20 minutes of the light lunge work or in hand work, and just see how he does. Now, the other dynamic that it's going to be interesting because next week we're moving to a new barn.
Mm,
My lease is up and I'm moving in with my boyfriend, and he lives 30 minutes south, but he lives southeast and the barn is northwest. And believe it or not, that 30 minutes puts me an hour away from the barn with
yeah,
traffic. So I found a barn that's only 8 miles away. It's an absolutely gorgeous facility, and all the stalls have walkouts, and he'll still get overnight turnout. They have 2 arenas. Their arenas actually have lights, which is nice,
great.
but it is a very busy barn. It's a busy show barn. So
He'll
it'll be,
probably settle in well. He's a pretty mellow guy, but if you're going to find he's challenged, like every horse is challenged. They all have setbacks when they move. They all become fearful when they move. So I would spend as much time with him as possible. And it doesn't matter if you're kind of walking with him in hand, if you're lunging, or if you're riding. The posture we're working on for his body is also a calming posture. So you know how to get him out of high-headedness, you know how to get him into long and low, you know how to do transitions. And so just stick with that, because what will really give him comfort and help him adjust faster is if you don't change. If the relationship between the two of you, even though he's struggling, if you keep asking for the same things, that change from high-headed to long and low is also the posture of safety. So the more often you kind of get him out of extension and he plunges into long and low, the quicker he can relax. So that's how you can help him adjust when you go to a new barn.
okay. Yeah, I've boarded with this lady before, not at this same barn. This is a new facility, but years ago I boarded with her for a long time. So she runs a very nice facility. She does have a big lesson program, but all her lessons are done by 7. So I'll probably time it where I come out a little later so the barn is quiet. But then it'll be nice to also get to ride with horses in the ring because our barn is very quiet in the evening. All the show people work their horses during the day, and then 9 out of 10 times I ride at night by myself.
Mm,
So it'll be nice for his mind, I think, to get that stimulation too of other horses. So I'm
yeah.
looking forward to the change. And, obviously I want to continue our program and our work. But the other thing that I think is nice is that I can ride her horses. So I've been taking a lesson a week at this barn just for myself,
Hmm.
to get on a horse, walk, trot, canter, and do, I've been like jumping fences and stuff like at her place. So in one aspect, I'm still getting the physical part of riding,
Hmm.
um, while I work on this stuff with my horse.
Sure.
So
Yes, and it'll be good to, you can learn through that comparison too by getting on different horses. Sometimes it freshens your seat when you get back on your own horse, you feel things differently.
I definitely feel things differently. And some of these school horses of hers, I mean, they're in 2 lessons a day. And I'm not saying I would never ever put my horse in a program like that. But I also look at these horses and I'm like, man, there's so much people just don't know like about horses and over time. And it's sad, but a lot of those horses are going to be completely destroyed, by their teens just because they're getting pounded in the ground, not ridden properly.
I think lesson horses are going straight to heaven.
Yeah.
I think all lesson horses are going straight to heaven.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, when I ride her horses, I love on them afterwards and I try hard because I feel like a lot of those horses don't get loved on like that either. So it's like, maybe I'll be in the position to try to do my little part to help some of these horses
Nice,
too. But anyways, I appreciate
nice,
all your help,
Cindy.
and you've given us a lot to think about, and we'll just keep working on it. I think I mentally feel a little calmer because
Oh, good.
sometimes the mental part is the hardest part, and it comes back to what you said with some of that guilt we feel
Yeah.
as like we did this to our horses.
Yeah.
So
And I think just shifting your focus when you really start to learn about mechanics and posture, You can be just as intense, just as much experiment, just as much fun, but your goal is first and foremost for the well-being of the horse. That's the biggest shift in how we think. So we don't come out with the agenda. We come out with curiosity, going, what can you do today with the best use of your body? And then challenge that. And that might help you feel like you can be more flexible with him too, without being so worried.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We'll continue to work on it. And I've already seen a lot of progress. So
Good.
we'll just keep going.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Talk
All
to you
right.
later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.